Up next, we have Tarun, who is the #1 Bitcoiner from Cincinnati. Thank you.
All right. With that introduction, how can I fail, right? So good morning, everyone. I am going to talk about Bitcoin and how it relates to U.S. commercial law. And all right, so I'm going to talk about Bitcoin and how it relates to U.S. commercial law. First of all, I am what I say is a reformed commercial attorney, and I have some technical skills, so I am also a wannabe developer. I have to give the obligatory little notice. This is not legal advice. You need to get your own lawyer, and this is not financial advice as well. I am licensed to practice law in the state of Ohio only, and we're in Georgia. So the thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the current situation. We're going to kind of explain what the problem is, and then we're going to talk about how what the solution is and where Bitcoin fits into that solution. The first thing to understand is the Uniform Commercial Code. So this is a comprehensive set of laws that encompass almost the entirety of commercial law. It's promulgated by a well-heeled, long-established organization, the Uniform Law Commissioners, or the Uniform Law Commission. And what they do is they put out these sort of model laws, and they're very well thought out. They're very, very good quality stuff. And they put it out to the various states, and all the states have to then adopt it or not adopt these laws. And for the UCC, all the states have basically adopted the same set of provisions. They've kind of tweaked the law just a little bit to suit their own needs, but for the most part, they've adopted very close to the model law. So it's really uniform throughout the U.S., really except for Louisiana for the most part. So the UCC is state law. It's not federal law. It's not regulatory. It's not of that kind of nature, but it's state law. And it's really an example of what law should be, because it looks at how people actually transact, how they actually operate, and then it tries to codify that. And it does that by categorizing assets in a certain way. And then it will apply those categories to things like sale of goods, leases, how bank deposits are handled, a whole bunch of other stuff, letters of credit, that kind of thing, and also security interests. So the UCC also has some official comments which are explanatory, and they can also be, judges will also find them to be very persuasive. And the interesting thing, which we'll talk about in the new revisions, is that the official comments are very favorable to Bitcoin. And they actually specifically mention Bitcoin. They don't mention anything else. And that's kind of huge, that the UCC, the commissioners who drafted these upcoming revisions, they had Bitcoin in mind. And I think that's a very good thing. So the UCC is looked upon as the plumbing of commerce. If everything is working fine, you don't notice it, okay? But if something goes wrong, you're going to notice it. And that's where we are right now with respect to Bitcoin, okay? And the commission, they understood that. They made some proposed revisions in 2022, and they actually created a whole new article that specifically addresses the concerns that you encounter with Bitcoin. So to understand that, we kind of need to look at the basic financing relationship. You got a bank making a loan to a business, okay? And in return, the business is going to give a note and also a security interest. So the thing with and the security interest, that's basically the collateral that is securing the loan, all right? And there's two things that you'll hear about a security interest. One is it attaches, or attachment, all right? And that's where the debtor is giving the security interest to the secured party, the bank in this case, all right? But the debtor can give that security interest to a whole lot of people. He can give a security interest in its accounts, in its inventory, in the cash that it has, to a whole bunch of different secured parties. So you got to figure out who has the priority, and that is perfection. So there's two things: attachment, when the security interest is first created, and then perfection is where the secured party establishes the priority. You'll kind of hear that a little bit maybe in this briefing, and that's what those mean. So the company is taking a loan, and it's going to give a security interest in all of its assets, its equipment, everything. All right, and then when it goes out and starts conducting business and sells its product to B is going to take, whatever that good is, all right, and he's going to give, in this scenario, is going to give a combination of dollars, checks, and Bitcoin as paying for the goods, all right. But the problem is that A gave a security interest to its bank on the inventory, which now is in B's hands, all right. So B is taking that good, whatever it is, subject to the security interest that A's bank has, all right? This is a completely unworkable situation, all right? And it's completely outside of B's expectations. B is thinking he owns the damn thing, and now he doesn't actually, all right? But there is a big, big exception, okay? And that's under a doctrine called buyer in the ordinary course. We're not going to talk about that. The point is that in a normal business kind of sale, the security interest cuts off, and B is comfortable knowing that he has the good all to his own, and it's not subject to any sort of encumbrance of any kind. All right. So A, in turn, is going to get all this cash, checks, and Bitcoin. All right. So keep in mind the general rule. The general rule is that the security interest persists no matter what what is transferred or when it is transferred, et cetera. All right, so the problem arises is when B has a bank and has previously given a security interest to its bank in the cash, the checks, and also the Bitcoin. All right, so when it transfers it to A, under the general rule, the security interest is going to persist. All right. And also, when A gets all those proceeds, there's laws in the UCC, there's provisions in the UCC that say that A's bank will also have a security interest in the proceeds as proceeds. So we got this general rule. The thing is that there's another big exception for money and deposit accounts. So if A is getting money and deposit accounts in the normal course of business, the prior security interests are going to cut off, all right? And that's exactly what you would expect. It's exactly what is needed for commerce to go, because if it didn't, you could see that commerce would shut down. It would just grind to a halt, okay? But the question is, what happens to that Bitcoin that A just received, all right? And we got that general rule. That general rule says the security interest is going to persist. So A is taking that Bitcoin, and it's subject to the security interest that B's bank has. So there's a little encumbrance, all right? And the thing is that there's no exception. Bitcoin is categorized as what's called a general intangible. That's the default category of assets when you can't find any other asset to call it. It's a general intangible, and general intangible does not get the benefit of any sort of special rule. So the security interest is going to persist. And then you can see how the problem is going to be compounded every time that Bitcoin is used. A is going to buy some service or something from C and pay for it with Bitcoin, and the security interest from A's bank is going to persist. The security interest from B's bank is going to persist, and then probably another one from C's bank itself. So you understand the problem. It is a stacking of security interest on security interest on security interest, and that's an unworkable situation, okay? But presently, we're in the situation where it might be your keys, but it's not quite your Bitcoin, all right? And that's creates a tremendous amount of legal uncertainty and concern. All right. Now, I think everybody here understands the practical risk, right? We understand that it's very hard after a while to track down and actually make good on a security interest, 100 transactions passed or even 2 or 3, but the practical risk might be lower, but the legal risks still persist. And given that uncertainty, people in commerce are going to be still a little bit very hesitant to make full adoption. So we talked about the security interest of cash and deposit accounts cutting off. All right, that's called negotiable, where you can freely transfer something without worrying that somebody else is going to have a prior claim on that. All right, that's called negotiable, and the solution is to make Bitcoin negotiable. So we're going to talk about that, but we're first going to talk about what the UCC did not do in these revisions. They did not make Bitcoin money. Okay, they did not call it money, and that has caused some concern, and the concern is really unwarranted. Okay, because the UCC recognizes the different layers of money. They have different names for those different layers. They have, we talked about deposit accounts, okay? That's, checking and savings accounts that are deposited in a bank. And so there's a categorization for that type of money, okay? When Bitcoin uses the term, when the UCC uses the term money, they're really talking about hard, tangible cash, okay? The definition is, something that's authorized by a government, all right? But there's other stuff in there with how it's treated that makes it clear it's talking about real hard cash that you have in your hand, you put in your mattress, et cetera, all right? And there's other stuff, other categories that address the different other sort of layers of money. So you can kind of see what the solution that they did pursue. They made a new class. They made a new asset. And that asset is called a controllable electronic record. All right? And they made a new rule. The new rule says that if you're this qualified or qualifying purchaser, then you're going to take your controllable electronic record, your CER, you're going to take it free of the claims in that CER. Okay? You're not going to have to worry about whether it's encumbered with, for example, like a security interest, that kind of thing. All right? Now, the preposition in is very important, all right? And it's contrasted with a claim that might be evidenced by the CER, all right? There's a little too much outside the topic of this talk, but that preposition is very important. And you can think of the distinction as if you had a dollar bill and you wrote a license agreement on that dollar bill, all right? But then you go pay for it. You go pay for your cup of coffee, and you give the vendor that. The vendor is going to have a right in the dollar as $1, okay? The vendor won't have the rights that are evidenced by that $1, which is the license agreement. So this has some real bearing on how ordinals will be recognized under the UCC, and the long and the short of it is they won't be. So that's something to keep in mind. The preposition in is very important there. So what we want to try to do is, in this scenario, is understand whether or not Bitcoin can be a controllable electronic record and whether A can be a qualifying purchaser. All right? If it is, then Bitcoin's negotiable. We treat it like cash. So what's a qualifying purchaser? It's a purchaser of a CER, all right? And it's a one who takes control of the CER, all right? And they do it in good faith. They do it without notice of any sort of other claim, and they do it also for value, okay? Those last three especially are borrowed from a well-known, well-understood legal doctrine called holder in due course law, which really pertains to checks and how checks are endorsed, et cetera, and how they can be, if you have an endorsed check, you can pass it to someone, and it's 5 minutes? Okay. All right. Well, we're going to speed this up because I got more than 5 minutes to talk. The bottom line is that what a qualifying purchaser is really centers on the nature of a CER and control. All right. So the concept of control, the UCC breaks it out into two major points. It's the power to do something, and it is the source of that power. All right. The power that we're talking about is to avail yourself of all the benefits of the CER, of that record, all right? And a record is just a piece of information, all right? Then you have to have the exclusive power to prevent other people from enjoying that benefit and the exclusive power of transferring control. And you also have to have the ability to readily identify yourself as the one that's in control, all right? So the exclusive term here, we shouldn't get too hung up about that. There's other provisions in the UCC that specifically say that sharing this power in a certain way will not destroy the exclusive nature. And that sharing is specified in a way that specifically accommodates things like multisigs. So we shouldn't be too concerned about that. All right, the point is you got to have these powers, this set of powers, and you got to have a source for it. All right, but before we talk about the source, we'll talk about how Bitcoin fits into this. All right, it's information, it's a record, all right, and it has a benefit. The thing that has a benefit is clearly the UTXO, right? I think we all understand that. And it also, the UTXO is what can be transferred, all right? And the UCC has some special provisions that specifically talk about how, given the nature of Bitcoin and the sort of what I term the destroy, create nature of a transaction with respect to UTXOs, that specifically is going to be a legally recognized transfer. And then also, the point is that the UTXO is the thing that has these powers. So we got to talk about what gives these powers. The UCC says only three things. One of three things can do that. The CER itself, so the UTXO has to give that power, right? Or the system in which the UTXO is recorded, so the time chain, all right? And you could also have a record that is attached to or logically associated with, all right? And either one, any one of these three things, it has to be doing the giving. So it has to be operational within the system. And that's also important for other reasons as well, all right? So what does that? It's the private key that does that. Clearly, the private key is what enables a person to actually hold the UTXO. It enables it to transfer, enables it to block everything away, and it also is the means by which you can readily identify yourself. You can sign, some other message, with a private key to establish that you have that private key. And that last provision, by the way, I think is the UCC exercised a lot of foresight. They might have been aware of Craig Wright and their forestalling, that type of litigation, because inherent within the nature of a CER has to be your ability to readily identify yourself as the one that's in control. So we understand control, we understand how it relates to Bitcoin. The UTXO is the thing that has that power. It's kind of like the piece of gold that you want to hold in your hand, and your hand, is the thing that's giving the power, just like the private key is the thing that is giving you the power to hold on. So with that, we understand that Bitcoin is a controllable electronic record, or will be under the proposed revisions of the UCC. And then we have to figure out, is A a qualifying purchaser, all right? And again, remember the context here is normal business. We're not talking about money laundering or anything like that, but in normal sort of business, A is going to be a qualifying purchaser. They're going to give value for the Bitcoin they're getting. They're doing it in good faith. They're not going to have notice of any other sort of claim, and they're going to take control of the Bitcoin with their own private key. So the takeaway here is that the UCC with these revisions, they're absolutely recognizing Bitcoin, and they're recognizing it in recognizing its nature as money, because they're making it negotiable. So these revisions will go a long way eliminating, well, it will eliminate that legal uncertainty that we talked about. And you'll be put in a position where truly it is your keys and it is your Bitcoin from a legal perspective. So that was an awful lot. And there's a lot of subtlety to all of this, and there's a lot more in those revisions that do pertain to Bitcoin. The revisions were not written exclusively for Bitcoin, so they kind of, try to accommodate, some other things. It's not quite clear exactly how they do accommodate those things, but it is very clear how that accommodates Bitcoin. And like I said, the official comments go out of their way to recognize Bitcoin, which is, I think, a very, very good sign. So if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer questions. And, if you don't have questions now, you can hit me up later. If you do have questions, I was told to make you stand up and come close so the mic is in range.
Questions?
So it sounds like they really did their homework and did a great job changing the stuff for Bitcoin. Other cryptocurrencies, most of them don't use the TXO model. Does that mean that balances on something like Ethereum or Cosmos are just kind of fucked?
So I don't know anything about Ethereum, all right? And I can't answer your question, all right? I think that there are provisions that are written generally enough that you might be able to, but that was not my focus, and I can't really comment, But I can confidently say they had Bitcoin in mind. There's no question about that.
Great. First off, thanks for the talk. It's very topical. I'm trying to map what you're describing to kind of situations that people would understand kind of inherently already. And one is the unintentional receipt of stolen merchandise. Like you go to a swap meet, you buy a boombox, you pay the guy, and suddenly like the cop shows up and says, hey, that's stolen merchandise, we're taking it. So it seems to kind of map to that. And also it seems to kind of map to the situation like I buy a house, I pay for it, I get my loan. The loan is the security for the bank. But then somehow later on I find out that some contractor the prior owner owned has a lien on my house.
Yes.
So there's another encumbrance, right? So
Yes.
are these kind of colloquial sort of analogies, or is it different substantively?
Yeah, the second thing you mentioned is like a mechanic's lien, right? A mechanic's lien is going to stay on the property. If it's not settled when it's sold, then the new property owner's on the hook to pay that, So a very, very similar sort of situation presently that Bitcoin would be in, And I forget what you first. Yeah. So that, I prefaced this by saying that we're talking about the normal, ordinary course of business, And if you're in business and you're operating the way you would normally do, and somebody comes in and pays for something with stolen Bitcoin, okay, and you have no knowledge of that, you're taking it for value in good faith. That's where the good faith comes in. It's gonna be your Bitcoin. It's just like if somebody had paid cash for something and you didn't know, right? But you can't be a front, to launder something through. That's where the good faith, disappears. That kind of thing.
So, two-part question. First part is, this is great for your Bitcoin, the UTXO model, but how does that translate to transactions done via Lightning Network?
So I think it transfers directly because it's still basically a UTXO, and
It's a theoretical UTXO, but it never actually settles back to the chain. So I don't know. But so the second part of that is you said that ordinals it would not apply to. What about things like Taproot assets that are in Taproot-proof signatures and also on the Lightning Network? Would it apply to those or no?
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting question. I don't know the complete answer, all right? Because the Taproot assets are going to be in an inscription, and
No, it's slightly different than an inscription, but yeah.
But it has to show itself at some point, okay? And it will show itself in the inscription, right? Somewhere in the witness field, it'll have to show itself, okay?
Yeah,
And
it's in a tree. It's kind of
right. It's in a tree, and it'll be embedded into the script pub. I understand that when you're holding the UTXO, right? But there's provisions in the UCC that will say that that's not enough to evidence the whatever the the TAP script might be evidencing. So.
Thanks. That was what I was asking.
Okay. So, but just to round out the issue of the inscription is I think some concern or some doubt that there's not a strong enough connection between the inscription, in the witness field and the resulting UTXO that you might be holding, because again, you're not going to know there's no evidence of what the thing is until you see it, and that has to be when you spend it,
I just wanted to offer some clarity. So you're correct about how inscriptions work.
Yeah.
With taproot assets, though, there's actually no reveal in the witness field.
Okay.
In fact, it's like a completely separate consensus layer from Bitcoin. There's a commitment to the asset that's stored in the UTXO. That is correct, but it's not revealed in the witness. It's actually not revealed anywhere in the transaction. So there's like a whole separate consensus layer that has to be built and followed.
Okay.
Does that change anything in your answer?
So it will change my answer to say that I don't quite know. I know with respect to inscriptions, and I kind of thought that was what I was answering, But with what you're saying, I don't want to venture an opinion just yet about that. I need to know and understand that a little bit better.
Yeah, it's still like an evolving thing.
Right.
So I don't think there's any clarity technically, let alone with regulation. So
the fact that we have this much anticipated clarity in the law and by the drafters of the UCC after only really less than what now 14 years, because nobody was thinking about this from a legal perspective until just probably a few years ago. So it's really quite remarkable that we have this much clarity this soon to begin with. But what you posed to me is indicates that I don't quite understand something. So I'd like to understand that better before I make an opinion.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Thank you.